Hey guys, welcome back to Cards and Comics, and today I got a video going over the latest pre-war vintage auctions, and again, it's a focus on the vintage side. I'm using three players that I follow because I'm still buying their cards, but they're very representative of the market. It's Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, and Mickey Mantle. I think their trends and how their prices are doing is kind of very indicative of how the market's doing and the health. I will also be comparing some SGC prices to PSA prices to see how they're doing. And then I'll share with you another project I'm working on and just see if you're interested in that project as well. Now, we'll start in 1952 Bowman with Willie Mays. And so there was an SGC 7.5 that sold. Here's the image. And this card has a little bit of a tilt diamond cut to it, and these cards are kind of targeted for trimming, because if you cut them kind of the right way, you can kind of straighten them a little bit. So this card scares me a little bit, but anyway, it was a 7.5. One hadn't sold in forever. I think like 4 years since the last seven had sold. 7.5 SGC, yeah, since 2017. Card doesn't come up that often, but $7,000 roughly. If you compare that to just a PSA 7, so that was a 7.5. The last PSA 7 sold for $9,500. You can say, well, one sold for 66 right below it, but you can see 83, 95, 15, 15. So in general, even in a higher grade, the SGC card brings less money. So that's something to think about on these really high-end vintage cards. All right, so I'll move in order of how pre-war, how I looked at the cards. So 69 tops. I pulled this one because it's a pretty high pop in general, but you can see it's very flat. If you look at the values here. The pre-war card just sold for $650, which is down from the 720, but 630, 8, 720, 5. Yeah. So since March, since obviously the explosion in February, which we can't look at. So that's another thing we got to keep in mind, is that February pricing is non-existent. So so now we have 3 months of data to really look at and say February was the anomaly. The card pricing is going down. And however, if you go back to February pricing, where this card was between $350 and $400, we're still above it, but we're heading back to that. We're kind of heading back to that direction. But I will say this is a pretty stable pricing, in all honesty. Between $650 and $700, and so I think the next 2 or 3 months will tell us if it's going to stay, above $600, or is this card going to go back, in the 500s, and maybe even back closer to that 400, and get even closer to what it was pre-bump. But this pricing here, when the card just kind of went nuts, is no longer valid. So if you were worried that you had to buy this card for a set and you're going to pay $1,000, I think you're going to get $600 pricing pretty consistently pretty soon. Moving on to the next card, which is the 66 batting leader. So I really want to showcase this card because this card's gone nuts, and it stayed nuts. And it's a cool card. I mean, I love this card. It's got Mays, Aaron, and Clemente. I think it's the only card with all three on it. And you can see back in February, this card, doesn't come up for sale that often, actually. And, it was a $400 card. It sold actually at $600 in a PWCC auction in February. Gosh, in November of last year. And it kind of just blew up, when the first one hit auction, in March. And it kind of went nuts, and then it went nuts again in later in March to $1,600. But I mean, the last one to sell, which was in this auction, still at $1,300. And if you think about it, it went from $350 to $400 to like still selling for $1,300. So this card really hasn't cooled off that much. And I don't know what the future of this card's going to be, but man, if you're holding on to it, good job, because this card, I think even if it cools off more, I mean, it's still going to be $600 to $800, I think, in the future. As people realize, it's kind of a one of a kind card showcasing these three really awesome Hall of Famers. Next up, I want to show kind of a similar card. Sorry, my allergies are up a little bit today. Is the Hank Aaron Willie Mays 64 top. So, again, these combo cards are becoming popular, and I'm seeing this in modern basketball too, where they're like, oh, it's a card with LeBron on it. Oh, it's a card with MJ on it. Oh, it's a Kobe and MJ on the same card. And those cards are starting to kind of take off on the base side, and I'm a little suspicious because I think it's because the base guys are kind of screwed right now because the base cards are doing so poorly that they're looking for ways to kind of prop up some of the base card values, but it's just me. Um, so this card saw again the February March kind of early bump, and again this card doesn't see a lot of sales in high grade. You know, between February and March, and April, sorry, there was like 2 sales, and it made the bump. It's come down a little bit, and this card was again selling for $250 to $300 before, so it's still double. But you can see it's made a somewhat dramatic price decrease, and I think in the end this card isn't as cool as the 66 liters card, but I do think it stays in that $400 to $500 range because again, it is a very cool card, and I think people just like these combo cards now. If the combo card craze kind of dies off, I could see where this card could die off a little bit, but I do think it is a very interesting card, and I think it's going to stay high. Now, moving on to 59, and the one thing I want to show you guys is I'm working on kind of, the guys I collect, Mays, Clemente, Aaron, Mantle, I guess whoever I want to collect. I'm working on a spreadsheet here using the pop report, and this is Willie Mays 50s cards, so it's not all the 50s cards. This is just the base tops Bowman. I'm not putting in the Redmans or anything really super duper rare. Just because those cards are harder to really have enough statistical information to make these kind of inferences. But I'm doing a high grade ranking, and I've got total amount of cards graded. I've got the total high grade cards and percentage, and then I'm going to rank them by all of Maze's cards in order by rank, by percentage, and total availability, and then do some aggregate scores. And just right off the bat, the one thing that's very interesting is that 52 Bowman I showed you earlier is the third hardest Maze card to get in availability. 201 total cards available, and by percentage, it's not in the top 4 or 5 because it's had a lot fewer cards graded. But I do think it's just because compared to like the 51 Bowman, where 2 or 3 is worth a lot of money. You just see a lot of people just subbing any 51 Bowman they can get. The 52 Bowman's not quite worth as much money, and you're not seeing a lot of subs unless it's a little higher grade. And the one thing that's very interesting is, even after all this time, the 2 hardest Maze cards to get are the 52 and 53 tops, and by availability and percentage graded. So it's those 2 cards should be very expensive because they're very hard to get. And this goes down to the 59 tops. And I did kind of this comparison where he's got 4 cards in the set. He's got a base card, a Hitting Kings card with Richie Ashburn, an All-Star card, and then a World Series catch card. And obviously, it's the most available card in the 50s. It's got 1,200 available cards between grades of 7 and 10. It's got 4 10s, like much higher than any other 50s card out there. It's got more 9s, than any. It's just the most available card in the 50s for Maze. But you look at his other cards that aren't quite as popular in terms of grading numbers, but they all have very similar amounts available and how many are high grade. So it just shows you that, you know, early in a card's life and grading, all the high end cards come first, and then later on, all the other cards come in, because if the card becomes valuable, people just sub for, any grade because it's worth something. And but it just shows you too that this card is highly available compared to any other 50s maze card. So going back to the history here, this card has just blown off the doors off what it was worth before this holding blew up. So it was a $800 to $900 card. It hit $1,000 a few times in 2000. Now it's tracking over 2,000 quite a bit. In February, you had that crazy $2,800, 24, 25. Now it's tracking back down to 1760, which is still almost double what it was selling for before. Very similar trend here is that the cards have doubled in price, but the tripling and quadrupling are definitely done. Those prices are coming down. But this card is going to be interesting for me to see for the next 5 months because it's so available. There's a lot of this card to go around. It's the most available 50s maze. And we'll see. And, another really available card for maze is 56. And, this card is holding steady. I think people just love this card. And you're seeing, it brought, around $2,000, similar to the last one that sold, higher than two previous, cards that sold. So you could say it's kind of trending up a little bit. I mean, I think this card is definitely, and this is sorry for a PSA 7. This card's really trending well. So this is, I would not say the 56 Maze is a card that's trending down in that PSA 7 grade, which is the most available grade. Again, going back to my handy dandy spreadsheet, you can see that the 56 maze has about 700 cards available between the white and gray backs. And as a word of caution, guys, don't put a lot of stock into the white back pop reports, because for the majority of this card's existence in the pop report, PSA didn't make a distinction between white and gray back. So I think the white back is rarer. I'm going to just say that, but statistically, there's no way to really prove how much rarer it is. So if you pay a premium, that's great. I wouldn't pay more than a 20% premium right now unless there's more data. But if you look at an aggregate in total, there's about 700 of this card available, which is, the 59 maze is the only one that's even higher. But, it has a lot of availability. So for this card to be that strong in a PSA 7, just shows you that it's, it's just a very popular card. Oh, sorry. This card has just never been that popular. Even though I like the card, in the end, popularity of cards matter a lot. That 56 Topps card, if you just look at it, in terms of availability, there's no comparison between a 54 Bowman, which has 177 sevens available, versus 688. But you can see price-wise that even go to a 7, that 54 Bowman 7, $1,500. I mean, there's 4,000 here, but that's a buy it now that was hit. But in general, that 54 Bowman, which is, available, 1/3 of the amount available, is bringing, almost half the price. So, I think that is a good lesson, is that, this card is really cratering in value. I mean, an 8's almost worth, the same price as a PSA 756, and again, it's popularity. So all I want to say is that you buy some of these cards, and if you love the card and the player, that's great. But just keep in mind, just because a card's more rare doesn't mean it's going to bring more. There's other factors you have to consider. So 52 tops, again, I talked about earlier. This is the second rarest maze card in high grade. A 4 brought 13,666 again. And so I brought this up because this is interesting because it's not a record sale. Obviously, it was bringing a little bit more back in March and April, where you can really see in February. So March is really when it hit. 17.6, 19.6, but it had trended down below $10,000 consistently, and bam, you hit this one, 1366. So it's interesting to see this hit, kind of a new high for the last month. And if you look at it, it is very well centered. And it gave, pre-war gave it that weird, A rating, and again, this does show that does have an effect. And centering on this card is very nice. So, yeah, and I don't know what these looked like. This was a really terrible scan. I mean, come on, people, you're selling a $10,000 card. This card's not that bad centered. It's a little angle cut. So again, I would say and that got the pre-war A as well. And so that was just back in 1 month ago. So $4,000 difference basically is pretty big. So this card definitely has some legs too. So the story I'm trying to paint on Maze is that not every card is nosediving. Not every card is selling for 1/4 of what it was before. I'm just saying in general the market's correcting back to normal, but some cards, especially the rarer and harder to find and more popular cards, are staying higher. 51 Bowman. Again, this card has cratered a little bit. This is a PSA 5. So the last one brought 1257, which is down from 15, which is down from 17, all the way down from almost $32,000 in March. So again, this is where people just got kind of nuts with the card, and thought it was just like a Hall of Fame rookie card. But people got a little crazy here. Again, this was around a 8 to he was selling around $8,000 in 2022. So 2020, sorry. So it's going up to 10 to 12 is reasonable. That 32,000 was just crazy pants. And a 65. This is the one card I wanted to show you too. I'll do some SGC comparisons, but this is the interesting one because this is a PSA 8. The last one sold 514. Pretty little off center. $1,000, but the one right before it in Heritage sold for $1,050. And then you go to the SGC 8, and pre-war just sold one, and it sold for $1,080. Sorry, not pre-war, but cards and browns. But it just shows you that like this card is one of the more interesting cards that actually is holding value. And I say this is just about availability and how much you like a card. I just think people really like this card. And if it's centered well, even if it's SGC, they're willing to pay a little bit more money for it. So again, Maze is popularity is important on the Maze cards. If you go to Hank Aaron, there's a little different story here to tell Hank Aaron, and I'm just gonna quickly go through the 70s cards here. Oops, sorry, didn't do that. So what I'm gonna show you is on the 70s cards. So these are all, see how choppy this is. But if you were to kind of spread it out a little bit, you'll see is like you had that February spike hit and then this choppiness. But in general, this is a 73. Sorry, I should have said it earlier. This is a 73 tops. The card went from selling for like $200 to $300. Not a big not a big swag. And now it's settling into that $250, $300 price range. But you go to 72, you see the same thing is that it's not really, it's selling, 350 to $500. It's pretty consistent, and we're not seeing, a dramatic, tailing, even on the 71 tops. Yeah, this brought 920, but that's very much in line. You had one 780 sell in there from Heritage, but on eBay, this card's been around $1,000 since March, and it's still around $1,000 2 months later. Aaron's 70s cards are not cratering. Um, you know, they're down from the ultimate highs in February, but look at the 70 card. I mean, $500. I mean, you had one buy now. I'm not sure if that was yeah, some guy got pretty lucky and hit a buy now at 350. But other than that, 450 to $500. I mean, that's a really good lift when this card was um, in the mid 200s. Back here, 250. Last September. So again, his 70s cards are not cratering. Now, even in 68, so here's 68 tops, PSA 8. All those cards are eights. We're not seeing Aaron cards really take a sharp nosedive. Yeah, 850, you saw 375, but they're back up to 550, $600. And again, you started that, you know, this line. I mean, it's not really going down much. Um, you just saw, a crazy record sell on his 66 tops. So this is a 66 tops Aaron, and it's really nice. I mean, I would give it a definitely a nice eye appeal, and it just sold for $2,000. It's pretty much the highest since that, crazy. There's one in April, but I mean, it's not $800, 11. I mean, this card isn't really cratering. You can say, you had some, the max prices back in March and April, but man, this card is not really going away. And so his, if you look at Aaron, um, yeah, some of these cards, like this is probably the, you can say this card has cratered a little bit, but it really, was going for $800. Now it's 16. So it's fitting that pattern of doubling in price since 2020. But it's the only one I found sold where I can say that it hasn't really kept the value pretty well. The 59 again, you know, from those crazy highs around $3,500, back to 1,600. Again, this card was $600. Prior to the kind of craziness, and 12 to $1,600 seems pretty reasonable to me. So I wouldn't call that one again cratering like we're seeing with some of the other prices. So, and again, things are down. I mean, in some of the prices. So I'm not going to say everything's up, but we're not seeing with Aaron this dramatic price decrease like we have with some other players. And again, with Mays, it's card by card, right? Some cards have cratered, like his 51 Bowman, but some cards have gone up, and some cards are stable. So again, with Aaron, the 70s are like pretty stable. Some of his early 60s cards are pretty stable. It's sort of where these cards just went off the deep end, like in these 55 Bowman, or sorry, 55 tops, where it was selling $8,000 for a 8, But if you look at it, $6,000, and this card's bringing it, close to $6,000 again. And so, is this going to stay stable? That's a huge lift from when the card was, 3,000. So again, doubling in price. So it seems like the doubling in price, model for some of the cards that are, let's say, a little easier to find. But I chalk up those 70s and 60s Aarons. They were just underpriced. And same way with some Maze cards. It's just, they were underpriced and they finally corrected, and they're not going to go down like that, dramatic we were seeing. Some of these 50s and rare hard to get cards are already priced pretty high, and so the correction is kind of seen a little more dramatic for them. And yeah, I'm looking at the 55 Bowman, which was the card that really started me to kind of set me off a little bit, because I was really looking for this card, really looking at the Maze and Aaron cards. I have this card in a 7, but just how much it had gone up. It went to like $2,600, and I was just like, wow. And we're seeing it settling, and it's kind of back to 2020 pricing, which is around $1,200, a little bit higher. So it went up and kind of went back down, and so this is definitely a card you can say is in that pricing. And comparing to SGC, this is again another just fun thing to go back and look is an SGC 88 brought $6,000 back in February, and that same card just brought $2,000. And again, you saw where the 7 here for PSA is bringing $1,500, and the 8 SGC is bringing 27. It just shows you that the price differences between SGC and PSA are still pretty wide for most cards. Few exceptions. And then I'm looking at this 59. Yeah, this is a good example. The 59 SGC 88 Hank Aaron, is bringing $900 for the last one that just sold. And again, this is the last PWCC auction, and that looks pretty nice. A little thin top to bottom, but if you go to again, the last PSA 8, that price difference, again, same auction. That's a $700 difference between the same card, same grade. So, SGC is definitely struggling a little bit to maintain value compared to PSA still. But going over to Mickey Mantle, I will say this is that Mantle pricing is very stable and strong. And here's 52 Bowman, 6, $8,000. I mean, it's gone dipped a little bit, but it's very stable. 53 Tops. This is a PSA 7. Again, pricing is very consistent around that $25,000 range. The last one, I mean, look at that 24, 27, 25, 24, 6. I mean, and this is a nice copy in the last auction. So again, Mantle cards are very stable. They're not really seeing huge dips. I mean, the 56 Mantle again just set a record price. I mean, I think this is the highest it's brought. It even surpassed what it was bringing in February. So again, that 56 Mantle has taken on a mythic type of status, where it's becoming just the card to have besides the Topps rookie right now. I mean, everyone's chasing the 56 Topps, and it's setting new prices. I think you got these buying groups out there looking for it as well. So you can just see, it is now setting new records in May. Some of it is a little easier to find cards, have stabilized. Obviously, there's the peak, but again, stable. 64 Tops has dipped a little bit again from the peak, but we're seeing a little uptick here. 65 Tops, which is probably one of the most popular 60s cards, very available. There's a lot of this card available, and it's the only one that you can say is really cratered. But again, this card, never saw these kind of crazy highs, which I think is very interesting for a PSA 8. In February, it went from 35 to 45, but we saw cards like doubling and tripling and quadrupling in price, and this card really didn't do that. In April it hit 6,000. Now it's down to 3,700, and I think that's a reasonable price. And this was a very average card. I don't know if it didn't get any special PWCC rating. So there you go. And then 67, which is a card I just purchased, um, pretty stable. In fact, we never saw, you saw two kind of spikes here to 1600. And this is for a 7. 16, 16, 15, 12, yeah, $1,000, $1,200. I just bought a 7.5, and figure that 7.5. They don't sell very often. It's very hard to figure out what PSAs are in the half grade are worth because this card sold 3 times this year, and between 14 and 11, and this is the one I just purchased. Obviously, much higher than back in 19 and 20. Well, this is really where I think it's very interesting, where just how often this card sold in 20, and now it's sold only 3 times in 21. But yeah, I mean, so, at the end of the day, when it's hard to, say the market is consistently doing the same thing across all vintage because, Mantle cards are stable and in some cases growing. Hank Aaron, price correction, I know he died this year, so I think that had a lot to do with it. But, his cards are stable to growing, and the price increases are not, really going back down. And I think we're seeing a correction on Aaron. And then May's cards, I think, for some of the more popular, hard to get, May's cards are staying high. Some of his cards are price correcting back to the lower levels we saw, before, but it's really a mixed bag on May's. You're seeing ups and downs. Aaron is really stable, and the growth is real. I think, again, underpriced, and Mantle is either growing or stable. So, the market is correcting on cards that just went bonkers, but in general, I think we're seeing normalcy coming back for a lot of the cards. Things are more expensive, but I don't think the fear we had that everything was quadrupling every month, and we were just going to see like prices just go to the moon and stay there is not really happening. A few cards have done that. If you were in the market for a 56 Mantle, and you thought you were going to be able to get pricing to come down on that card, I think you're not going to find it coming down for a long time. But if you were in the market for a 51 Mays, and you didn't pay $30,000 for it, you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself now because that card has come way down. So, I think, do your homework, do your math, create your spreadsheets and charts. But, the market is definitely having, a lot of movement, and I think it's kind of fun. And there's some deals out there, guys. So, I think there is going to be a lot of churn and movement before the national, and I think the national is going to be very key to see where these dealers are priced because, these high prices, are they going to be seen at dealers' tables? Or are they going to see that in general the prices have come down some? Do they buy during that time period? I mean, we're going to see some interesting things in the national. So I know it's a long video, but I wanted to just go through pricing because I think pricing on vintage cards is more enjoyable for me to review than modern cards, because I feel like modern cards are so easy to change because of just a guy has one at bat. Vintage cards have a lot more going on to them, and it's more fun for me. So hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next.